I can confirm that there are 2 individuals who have died this afternoon, and there are another 8 in critical status, though stable, at Rhode Island Hospital.
At 5:54 p.m., while the shelter-in-place warning was still in effect, and while students were still huddled inside classrooms, Donald Trump posted on social media claiming that he had been briefed that the FBI was on the scene and that the suspect in the shooting at Brown University had been apprehended. He ended with a familiar line, "God bless the victims." But the problem was this: it was completely wrong. Just minutes later, the university issued another emergency alert, stressing that the situation was still ongoing. The danger had not passed, and everyone had to continue sheltering in place. In situations like this, a single piece of false information can cost lives. In other words, while law enforcement was trying to maintain order and protect lives, the US president was sending the exact opposite signal. It's over. It's safe. This was not a minor mistake. This was not a technical detail. It was a direct contradiction between the president's statement and the active security warnings meant to protect the public. Less than 20 minutes later, Donald Trump was forced to completely reverse his statement. In another post, he admitted that the suspect had not actually been apprehended. There was no apology, no clear explanation, no acceptance of responsibility, just a quiet correction after the false information had already spread across social media. But in those 20 minutes, what could have happened? Put yourself in the position of a student hiding in a classroom. Your phone buzzes. A notification from the US president. The suspect has been arrested. What would you think? Would you stay put in the dark? Or would you stand up, open the door, and step into the hallway where the shooter might still be? That is exactly why security experts always stress this point. During an active crisis, there is only one source of information that should be trusted: law enforcement on the scene, not social media, not speculation, and certainly not rushed posts from a politician. The problem is even more serious because Donald Trump is not just a social media user. He is the US president. When he says, "I've been briefed," those words carry the weight of state power. They can make people believe this is official information, confirmed at the highest level, and when that information is wrong, the consequences are no longer a media issue. They are a matter of life and death. Notably, it wasn't just Trump personally spreading false information. The official White House account also reposted the statement, then later had to delete or correct it. Once again, information chaos was amplified from the very center of power. When the head of the executive branch becomes a source of misinformation in a life or death situation, the question is no longer, was he wrong? But how is this system even functioning? Wait. The shooting at Brown was not just an isolated tragedy. It is part of a much larger picture. Gun violence has become normalized in the US. Locked down, you shelter in place. Alerts have become a routine part of school life, something that barely exists in many other developed countries. The difference is not human psychology, it is policy. In the 1990s, when the US enacted an assault weapons ban under President Bill Clinton, mass shootings declined noticeably. When that ban expired, and when a conservative-leaning Supreme Court repeatedly loosened legal restrictions on firearms, violence returned, more intense and more frequent. The irony is that most Americans do not oppose gun control. Surveys over many years show that roughly 70 to 80% of the public supports reasonable gun safety measures, including stricter background checks and limits on assault weapons. Yet that public will has repeatedly been blocked in Congress, primarily by the Republican Party. Alongside this policy gridlock is an increasingly radical gun culture within the MAGA movement. When some Republican lawmakers wear AR-15 pins instead of the US flag inside the Capitol, the message is unmistakable. Guns are no longer just tools of self-defense, but political symbols. And when violence becomes a symbol, it soon becomes action. In this context, leadership during crises matters more than ever. But instead of reassuring the public with accuracy and information discipline, Donald Trump reverted to a familiar instinct: post first, verify later, or not at all. The Brown University incident reveals something deeply troubling. When a crisis hits, chaos does not come only from the shooter. It also comes from those with the highest responsibility to protect the public. And this is only the beginning of the story. In the next part, the picture expands beyond US borders, where Donald Trump calls himself a peace president, yet a series of conflicts around the world tells a very different story. If the shooting at Brown University exposed chaos in how Donald Trump handles domestic crises, the picture abroad reveals an even larger contradiction. Donald Trump repeatedly calls himself a peace president. He has said it countless times. He claims he is the only one who can end wars. He says other presidents let the world fall into chaos, while he brings peace. But when you look at reality, from the Middle East to Africa to Europe, what exists is not peace, but escalating war. Take Gaza as the clearest example, and it is same. Trump and pro-administration media outlets have repeatedly talked about ceasefires, peace deals, and historic breakthroughs. But on the ground, no document has been signed between Israel and Hamas. There is no binding ceasefire, no political roadmap. Palestinian civilians continue to be killed almost daily. Airstrikes continue. What is called a ceasefire exists far more on social media and in speeches than in real life. In Southeast Asia, the pattern repeats almost exactly when tensions flared between Thailand and Cambodia. Donald Trump quickly appeared to claim credit. He declared that he had put the ceasefire back on track. He said both sides had agreed to de-escalate, but just days later, fighting intensified, casualties rose. The Thai government was forced to publicly reject Trump's statements, confirming that no such ceasefire existed. Meanwhile, civilians along the border continued to die from shelling and armed clashes. In Africa, the situation is even more stark. Trump claimed he helped bring peace to the Congo-Rwanda region. But on the ground, the M23 armed group, widely believed to have close ties to Rwanda, continues to push deep into Congolese territory. Fighting has not decreased. Civilians continue to flee their homes. Peace in this case is not an outcome. It is a political label slapped onto a war that never stopped. But the biggest and most dangerous hotspot remains Ukraine. Donald Trump once promised to end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. Not 24 days, not 24 weeks. 24 hours. It was one of the boldest promises in modern political history, and one of the most false. The war in Ukraine has not ended. It has escalated. Russia has intensified attacks on civilian infrastructure, ports, and commercial areas. Cities continue to be struck. Civilians continue to die. At the same time, Trump has increasingly shown a pro-Russia stance, repeatedly criticizing Ukraine, pressuring Kiev to make concessions, and working to isolate President Zelensky. This shift is not just rhetorical, it is clearly reflected in US actions on the international stage. At the United Nations, the US became the only country to vote against a resolution aimed at protecting humanitarian aid workers and UN personnel worldwide. 153 countries voted in favor, not 10, not 20. Almost the entire world. Russia did not vote against it. Russia abstained. But the US voted no, standing alone against the rest of the international community. It did not stop there. The US also voted alongside Russia, China, Cuba, and Belarus to oppose a resolution related to studying and mitigating the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster, a nuclear catastrophe whose effects the world is still dealing with decades later. What message does that send? That the US is no longer acting as a moral leader, but is choosing to align itself with regimes most often criticized for human rights and transparency abuses. None of this happens in a vacuum. It reflects the same pattern seen from Brown University to Gaza, from Ukraine to the United Nations. A style of leadership based on declarations rather than reality, on image rather than consequences. Donald Trump does not wait for confirmation before speaking. He does not prioritize accuracy in a crisis. He prioritizes speaking first, dominating the narrative first, and claiming credit first. But in politics, especially global politics, the cost of carelessness is not just a loss of credibility, it is the loss of lives. When the US president says the suspect has been arrested when no one has been arrested, people can die because they believed it. When the US president says there is a ceasefire while war is still raging, decision makers on the ground can make deadly mistakes. When the US president says, "I bring peace," while bombs are still falling, what erodes is not just the truth, but global trust in US leadership. The most frightening part is not that Trump gets it wrong once. It is that he gets it wrong systematically. And each time he does, the price is not paid by him directly, but by those farthest from power, students on a university campus, civilians in war zones, aid workers in global hotspots and destitute, from Brown University to Ukraine, from shelter-in-place alerts to United Nations resolutions. A clear line is being drawn, a line connecting information chaos, weakened leadership, and an increasingly unstable world. The final question is no longer whether Donald Trump can maintain the image of a peace president. The real question is, how many more lives will the world have to pay for statements that were never verified,